Billionaire CEO Gavin Rothschild raised his champagne glass and gestured to the crowd of executives, influencers, and socialites packed beneath the soaring skylights of the newly opened Rothschild Tech headquarters. "And now," he declared, voice booming across the hall, "a challenge. For anyone here who thinks they can outsmart the AI I just unveiled, speak now." There was silence. Then came a chuckle, low, condescending, as Gavin's gaze slid to the one figure who didn't belong. She was kneeling, scrubbing the marble floor just past the velvet rope. In a faded gray uniform, hair tied back with a cloth band, she looked more like part of the background than a guest. Yet somehow, her eyes never left him. Gavin smirked. "You there? The maid. You look curious. Care to challenge a billion-dollar algorithm?" Gasps rippled across the room. A few stifled laughs. Phones came out. She stood slowly, steady and unhurried. Her hands still smelled faintly of bleach, her knuckles raw from weeks of overtime shifts. But her voice, when it came, was clear. Quiet. "I accept." The room erupted. "Does she even know what AI stands for?" someone whispered. "Is this a publicity stunt?" another sneered. But Gavin leaned in, eyes gleaming. "All right then, darling. If you can solve this AI's core encryption puzzle in under an hour, I'll write you a check for $10 million. He let the number hang, dramatic pause fully loaded. "And if you fail," he added, almost sweetly, "you'll finish scrubbing every floor in this tower. Tonight." The crowd howled with delight. The media circled. A maid versus the machine? It was madness. But the woman, no name given, simply nodded. "Do you have a terminal available?" she asked, her voice like silk against steel. And as Gavin waved toward a touchscreen station at the side of the ballroom, no one noticed the flicker in her eye. Not yet. They didn't know. She built this algorithm once, and then they stole it. She stepped toward the touchscreen console with unshaking hands, even as cameras hovered and laughter curled around her like smoke. Gavin Rothschild leaned against his champagne tower, grinning like a man already celebrating. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Just press a few buttons, and when it's too much, I'll be gracious." She didn't answer him. Her fingers danced over the glass. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. The Rothschild cipher, they called it. A proprietary neural lock that took Gavin's engineers 2 years to encrypt and 6 months to teach the AI to defend. Designed to be unsolvable, untouchable, she murmured, almost to herself, still running on the same backbone, just with a shinier shell. "What was that?" Gavin called mockingly, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes moved with the code. Not reading, remembering. 4 years ago, before the Rothschild skyscraper, the tech empire, the ribbon-cutting gallus, there had been a lab. Small, independent, hidden in a co-working basement in Queens. She had written the core architecture there, line by line, as part of a think tank Gavin quietly funded. No credit, no contract, just the promise of exposure and a handshake she'd been foolish enough to trust. Then came the lockout. One Monday morning, her access revoked. Her designs gone. The company absorbed into Rothschild Innovations LLC. She'd fought, tried, sent letters, made calls, even stood outside the building once, holding a printed copy of the original architecture, her architecture. No one cared. So she folded, got a job cleaning floors, watched her work praised as a revolutionary leap in AI architecture. Tonight, she wasn't just accepting a challenge. She was reclaiming her name. Back at the console, she typed a single line into the AI's defense layer. A string of symbols so obscure, so specific, that only its original architect would know how to inject it without crashing the entire system. And when she hit enter, nothing happened. Then everything happened. The AI paused, just long enough for Gavin to straighten up. The crowd hushed. Lines of code shimmered, reversed, began to break themselves apart. "Wait," Gavin muttered. "What is she doing?" Someone gasped. Is that the back door?" She turned to face him for the first time, and smiled. Gavin's grin faltered. On screen, the AI's encryption spiraled, shifting from elegant symmetry into something chaotic, recursive. It was unraveling, not crashing, surrendering. She's bluffing, Gavin barked, stepping forward. No one outside my team knows that system. But the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. One of his lead developers, a nervous man with a rising hairline, pushed to the front. Sir, that sequence, it's embedded. Deep. Pre-core. What? Gavin hissed. The developer's face went pale. That code. It was there before the encryption was finalized. Before we even locked the build. It's original source code. Someone else said it out loud. She's not hacking it. She's the one who wrote it. The room erupted in gasps. Phones shot up again, but this time they weren't laughing. They were recording. The maid, the woman with bleach-stained sleeves and raw knuckles, didn't flinch. She tapped another line on the console. A hidden line of annotations slid onto the screen, one that no Rothschild developer had ever noticed because they hadn't known where to look. It read, Build V0. 1, designed by Alea. For those left unseen. The signature hung like a ghost in the air. And suddenly, the humiliation shifted. Not hers. Gavin's. He stepped back, jaw clenched, red creeping up his neck. Security, he muttered. Get her away from that console. But no one moved. Because for the first time that night, the people in the room realized. She wasn't some maid who got lucky. She was the storm they'd ignored. Silence clung to the walls like fog. Even the live DJ, unsure what was happening, let the music fade into an awkward loop. The only sound now was the soft hum of the system trying, and failing, to reassert control. She stood, hands still hovering above the console, not out of uncertainty, but grace, giving Gavin Rothschild one last chance to stop digging his own grave. He didn't take it. You stole that code, he barked, pointing a trembling finger. You were a janitor, not a developer. Don't play games with me. Her voice was calm, low, the kind that made people lean in. I was a research assistant in your shadow project, Gavin. You remember. The ones you paid under the table. No contracts. No names on paper. But I kept my notes. The originals. And I've already sent them. To who? He spat. Every journalist you didn't invite tonight, she replied. The crowd gasped again. Whispers ignited like sparks on dry tinder. Is this real? She wrote his AI? Why does she have the original build signature? Gavin scanned the room, suddenly realizing the worst part of power. Once it starts slipping, people rush to help it fall. Executives who'd toasted him minutes ago now studied their glasses. Influencers began inching away from the cameras. Lies, Gavin muttered. She's a bitter, underpaid tech flunky who's trying to hijack my moment. But no one was listening to him anymore. They were watching her, and her quiet, undeniable presence. One man stepped forward, older, suit tailored but worn, a journalist who had been there not for the party, but for the story. What's your name? He asked gently. She turned, and for the first time that night, said it with full weight. Malika Alea. Gasps swept the room, and Gavin's empire started to crack. Gavin's jaw clenched so tight, you could see the pulse beating in his temple. Cut the stream, he snapped toward his tech crew. Now. But it was too late. The room had turned from audience to jury. Malika Alea. The name was already trending. People whispered it as if trying it on for size. Whispers rose to murmurs, murmurs to questions. Did she really say she designed the core? Why wasn't she credited? Was she erased? Malika turned from the console. Her eyes scanned the room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I was part of a team Gavin Rothschild quietly assembled in 2020, she began. Young developers. Marginalized. Overworked. Promised internships and maybe jobs. Her voice sharpened. We were told our names didn't matter. Only the product did. That our code would serve a greater vision. She held up a flash drive. This contains every line of my original work, with timestamps, builds, and notes, all matching what's buried inside the Rothschild cipher. A beat of silence. Then the journalist, his voice just loud enough, asked, Why clean floors? The question hung like a challenge. But Malika didn't flinch. Because they made sure I couldn't get work after I spoke up. The industry closes ranks around power, and I had none. Even the cameras seemed to lean closer. She stepped away from the terminal. But I don't want Gavin's money. I want my name back. And I want every young coder told to stay quiet, to know silence is not safety. People were standing now, some clapping, others just stunned. And Gavin, he looked like a man trapped in a crumbling glass palace. Because he knew what was coming next. Not just her name, but his fall. Gavin turned toward the console, frantic now, jabbing at the touchscreen, trying to lock her out, to erase what she had shown. But the system denied him. Again and again. Access denied. Root authority transferred. He froze. The transfer protocol was her original failsafe, a hidden function she'd buried years ago. A fingerprint in the architecture. It wasn't a hack. It was her right. Malika watched him, not with vengeance, but something sharper, truth. Gavin spun back toward the crowd, desperate. You're all being manipulated. She's lying. We ran this code through dozens of integrity checks. But his voice cracked in the wrong places. His words landed hollow. The journalist stepped forward. We've already received verification from 2 independent labs. The failsafe, the signature, the embedded tags, it all checks out. Gavin took a step back. You're making a mistake, he muttered. Malika tilted her head, voice soft but slicing. No, you did. When you decided I didn't matter. From the back of the room, someone began to clap. Slow, deliberate. Then another joined. And another. Until the room echoed with it. Not wild applause, but something heavier. Recognition. Reckoning. Malika stood alone beneath the glass ceiling. And for the first time that night, she wasn't unseen. The clapping stopped as quickly as it began, replaced by something more powerful. Silence, charged and waiting. Gavin stood trembling, a shadow of the empire he had just flaunted. He looked around for allies, anyone to speak on his behalf. None came. Even his own CTO, a man in an obsidian suit who'd bragged about revolutionary breakthroughs an hour earlier, quietly stepped away from the spotlight. He wouldn't go down with the ship. Malika, Gavin tried, suddenly soft. Let's talk privately. I didn't know. If someone in legal. You knew, she said. No fury. Just the kind of calm that comes from carrying the truth long enough to not need to shout it. You knew my name when you locked me out. You knew it when you filed the patent under Rothschild-only entities. You knew it when your team scraped my GitHub contributions to rewrite history. The words weren't just for him now. They were for the hundreds listening, and the thousands watching as the moment went viral. Hashtags were already exploding. Hashtag Malika. Hashtag Rothschild exposed. Hashtag she built it. A lawyer in the crowd stood and cleared her throat. Miss Alea, if you choose to pursue legal action, you'll have no shortage of representation. I specialize in intellectual property theft. Malika nodded once, but she didn't smile. This wasn't about revenge. It was about repair. Then we begin with truth, she said, turning back to the console. Let's see what else is hidden inside the code he built his empire on. And with that, she pressed enter again. The next gate opened, and what spilled out wasn't just stolen code, but records, emails, logs, conversations, the blueprint of a cover-up. The screen pulsed with a soft blue glow as file after file began to open. Timestamps, internal memos, project tags buried deep beneath layers of system protection. Each one telling a story Gavin had paid millions to keep quiet. The crowd drew closer. One document caught everyone's eye. Subject line. Attribution removal. Clean version for board. Malika didn't need to open it. She remembered writing the original report. It was a research summary she'd compiled to present to the development team during the project's early phase. Her name had been on every page. But the version on screen? Scrubbed clean. No bylines. Rebranded. Just the Rothschild logo on the footer. A quiet gasp spread through the room. Someone whispered. They white-labeled her life's work. Malika clicked again. Another file. This one was an internal message. She's asking too many questions. Lock her out of the system. Say it's a restructuring. Gavin flinched visibly. You read these? He hissed toward one of his execs. The man didn't reply. A younger coder stepped forward, the only one brave enough to meet Malika's eyes. I saw these logs, she said. But they said you were being compensated. That you agreed to walk away. Malika's voice was steel now. They said that to protect themselves. I had no NDA, no check, no job offer. I sent 47 emails. I begged for transparency. They erased me instead. Even Gavin didn't try to interrupt this time, because the room wasn't his anymore. It belonged to her. And the code, the very thing he tried to use to erase her, had become her witness. Gavin Rothschild tried to speak, mouth opening, hands raised in that practiced gesture of corporate regret, but the room wasn't listening. Not anymore. Malika turned the screen toward the crowd. This system isn't just flawed. It was built on theft. My work, my name, and the labor of dozens of others who never saw a single dollar. She tapped again, and a list of emails populated the screen. Names of junior developers, interns, underrepresented coders with timestamps and revision tags, none credited. Most were gone now, pushed out, burned out, or bought off. Malika looked at Gavin. You built your brand on innovation. But you never innovated. You harvested. The words sliced through the room like broken glass underfoot. One reporter raised her voice. Mr. Rothschild, do you deny the authenticity of these files? Gavin stammered. We were consolidating authorship. For clarity, that's standard. Malika cut in. So is theft, apparently. He flinched like she'd slapped him. Tell me, she continued, voice low. When you watched me scrub the floor 3 weeks ago, when you walked past me like I was invisible, did you know who I was then? He swallowed. I didn't recognize. Exactly, she said, stepping closer. Because people like you never look long enough to see who's actually building your empire. Silence thundered. Then came the applause, louder now. Fierce. Not just for the moment, but for the years it took to reach it. And somewhere in that noise, Gavin Rothschild realized. He was no longer the most powerful person in the room. The applause quieted into a steady hum of realization, a shift. Power had changed hands not with a hostile takeover or board vote, but with truth and a terminal. Malika looked out over the crowd, her breath even, her hands steady now, not from adrenaline, but ownership. This was hers. And finally, it felt like it. A man in a tailored gray blazer, one of the Rothschild board members, stepped forward. Miss Alea, he said, voice tentative, trying to stay ahead of the fallout. There's obviously been a serious oversight. If you'd be willing to meet with us privately. She stopped him with a single look. Don't call it an oversight. Call it what it was, erasure. He flinched. I'm not here to negotiate, she continued. I'm here to rewrite the truth, publicly. Because there should never be another boardroom full of executives who think the people beneath them aren't watching. Cameras flashed. Reporters typed faster. Behind her, the screen remained aglow, files still open, timestamps blinking like a metronome counting down Rothschild's credibility. Gavin tried one last play. I'm willing to settle. We can work out restitution. Malika shook her head. I'm not after your money. Pause. I'm after your legacy. Gasps. And then, like an exhale the room had been holding for too long, a wave of cheers. She had said the thing everyone else was too afraid to. She didn't just want justice. She wanted to be seen. And tonight, finally, she was. Somewhere in the back, a voice called out. How many others did he erase? It wasn't a reporter. It wasn't a lawyer. It was one of the wait staff, a young man holding an empty tray, watching with wide, tear-rimmed eyes. Malika turned toward him. More than you think, she said softly. And not just here. All over this industry. Another voice followed. Then another. I interned at Rothschild Labs in 2021. My code showed up in the final launch, but they told me I wasn't senior enough for credit. I was on the QA team. We raised concerns about the ethics of the AI's data filters. They fired us. I wrote the multilingual input parser for the early builds. I was told to stay quiet and be grateful for the exposure. It snowballed. The truth, long buried under NDAs, fear, and debt, rose like floodwater. Gavin backed toward the edge of the stage, pale, shrinking, helpless against the wave he'd unleashed and ignored for years. He looked for the exits, but found only witnesses. Malika stepped forward, facing the growing crowd not as a victim, but as a leader. We were silenced. Underpaid. Forgotten, she said. But the code remembered us. A quiet tear rolled down the cheek of a developer in the back row. Malika raised her voice now, not to shout, but to amplify. We are the architects of the future, and tonight we take back our names. The ballroom, built to celebrate wealth and power, erupted in the sound of revolution. The room buzzed now, not with awe, but action. Reporters darted between whispers and Wi-Fi connections, live-streaming the fall of a tech giant in real time. Legal consultants whispered furiously into phones. Rothschild PR agents paced the corners, sweating under soft lights. And in the center, Gavin Rothschild stood alone. His empire, his glittering illusion of invincibility, was unraveling thread by thread. It wasn't just code that betrayed him. It was truth. He made one last attempt, stepping toward Malika. You've made your point. But do you realize what you're doing? You're burning down a platform that could have made you rich. She didn't step back. You mean the same platform you built on stolen dreams and unpaid hands? No one's perfect, Gavin muttered. Malika blinked slowly. No, she said, but some of us are honest. Then she turned from him, not out of disdain, but because he was no longer the center of the story. That title had moved. People began to circle around her, young developers, overlooked engineers, coders of every shade and accent. They didn't ask for autographs. They asked where they could help. She handed the flash drive to a journalist. You have my permission, she said. Tell the story. Show the world who really wrote this future. From the shadows, the floor supervisor, the woman who had given Malika the cleaning job months ago, emerged. Her voice cracked. You're the one who rewired the panel that night, aren't you? When the servers overheated. You saved the building. Malika nodded. I always fixed what he didn't see. And now, finally, the world saw her. Outside, news vans lined the street like vultures circling something they couldn't quite categorize. Was it a scandal? A revolution? Or just long overdue justice? Inside, Malika stood where only CEOs had stood before, center stage, lit by chandeliers that once ignored her presence. The terminal was still glowing behind her, the code whispering its secrets in full view. She turned to the crowd, and this time she spoke not just for herself. For every woman told to wait her turn. For every black or brown coder whose brilliance was buried in footnotes. For every genius who cleaned bathrooms at night and solved logic trees in her mind by morning. She looked directly into the camera lenses now. We are not hidden anymore. The room erupted in applause again, not polite, not performative. Fierce, uncontainable. It wasn't just support. It was allegiance. Backstage, Gavin sat slumped in a chair, hands shaking. A producer from a major network approached with a clipboard. We'll need a statement. On camera. Soon. But he just stared ahead, hollow. The king who'd built a castle on borrowed bricks, only to watch the original builder take it back, brick by brick, line by line. Across the room, the boardroom door quietly closed behind three directors. They were already in damage control mode, but even they knew. There was no putting this back in the box. Malika walked toward the exit now, calm, not needing the last word, because she'd already coded the first one. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Malika stepped inside, alone again, but not unseen. As the doors closed behind her, she caught a glimpse of the crowd. Developers, custodians, lawyers, press, and young women gripping notebooks like swords. All of them still watching. All of them awakened. The elevator hummed as it descended. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored walls. Same gray uniform. Same calloused hands, but something had shifted. Her eyes no longer carried the quiet ache of invisibility. They carried proof. By the time the doors opened on the ground floor, a small group was already waiting. Reporters, yes, but also coders. One of them, a teenage girl with thick glasses and a hoodie, stepped forward nervously. Miss Alea, I read your papers online. I never thought someone like me could do what you just did. Malika smiled gently. Someone like you, she said. You're exactly who's supposed to. The girl beamed, blinking away tears. Malika walked through the lobby, past portraits of Rothschild's founders, men cast in gold, frozen in arrogance, and toward the revolving door. As it spun behind her, the cold night air greeted her like freedom. She walked alone into the darkness, but now, the whole world was behind her. And far above, on the tower's brightest screen, the company's banner glitched for just a moment. The Rothschild logo flickered, then changed. Rothschild AI became M. Alea, core architect. The city saw it. The world saw it. And for the first time, they said her name out loud. 3 weeks later, Malika sat in a small sunlit room overlooking a city that had finally begun to call her by her name. The space was modest, clean walls, second-hand desk, a humming laptop that barely kept up, but it was hers. On the wall behind her, a whiteboard was already crowded with ideas. Not product pitches, not profit margins, blueprints for equity, emails pinged by the minute, mentorship requests, speaking invitations, collaboration offers from universities and startups across the globe. Some came with checks. She ignored those. She replied to the students first. Across the room, a fresh logo glowed on her screen. Foundation, build from the shadows. An open-source incubator for marginalized coders, engineers, and designers. No gatekeeping. No NDAs. No stolen credits. She'd used the money from a small settlement, not Gavin's hush money, but a collective restitution fund secured after a wave of public pressure and lawsuits, to launch it. And the world noticed. Not just the media, the quiet ones. The janitor who scribbled circuits in the margins of his break room notebook. The undocumented genius tutoring kids while coding deep learning models at night. The teenage girl from the Bronx teaching herself JavaScript on a cracked phone. They wrote to her. She wrote back. The foundation grew, and the seed that Gavin tried to bury, it had become a forest. Months later, at a quiet university lecture hall packed wall to wall, Malika stood at the podium, no longer just a name whispered online, but a force reshaping the very ground beneath tech's glittering towers. Behind her, a slide flickered on screen. It wasn't her face. It wasn't code. It was a quote, simple and unadorned. They tried to make her invisible, so she made herself unforgettable. The audience, a sea of young minds, engineers, dreamers, and believers, leaned in. Some of you will be underestimated, she began. Others will be ignored. Some of you will watch your work get praised by people who never learned your name. But let me promise you this. She looked around the room. They can steal your credit. They can rewrite your name. But they cannot take what you know. And if you carry it long enough, with fire, with care, the world will have no choice but to see you. Silence followed. The heavy kind. The holy kind. Then, standing ovation. As the applause washed over her, Malika smiled. Not for validation, but because she knew. They would remember her. Not because she screamed the loudest, but because she built something no one could erase. Greatness often comes dressed in overalls, hidden behind doors labeled maintenance only. But truth and talent do not stay buried. Respect isn't granted by wealth. It's earned by wisdom, integrity, and the courage to speak when silence is demanded. Look closer. The genius you ignore today might be the one rewriting your future. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.